these, networking, or platforms, and she wanted to hear my opinion, and she was worried that her approval is going to be, rejected. I always say, if committees are to approve your topic, it starts there. It's not like they approve your topic, then same time your proposal and same time your methodology. It starts there to say this topic or title is legitimate. Why then should there be obstacles, provided that the researcher is as transparent as possible? You take people step by step, because people can argue a beautiful story when you tell them, this is what I did, and 2 months after that I was rejected and I was invited again. So you find a way to slot it in, because that is what I think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if it's Guba or Lincoln and Guba who talk about, I think it's also Cresswell who talks about trustworthiness. Just help me there in case I'm incorrect. All right, I made a little bit of notes just for me to remember. I think it's where they talk about trustworthiness. Trustworthiness, yeah, it's Lincoln and Guba and Cresswell. They say to us, for people to trust your story, take them like a novel. You know, when you read a novel, yeah, you should be able to see the picture. And no one, I don't think even the ones who are so stringent and say, nah, approval should not be granted. I mean, if you come and say the chief has given me permission, remember, you bring in your ethical application, you bring in to convince them to say, I already have permission from the chief. By doing that and documenting it in your dissertation or thesis, I don't know, that they'll have to fight their objections somewhere, somehow. So the secret I learned about my PhD: be as transparent as possible. You know, or if you read in my thesis or my dissertation, I don't know what people call it. Other people call it dissertation, other call it thesis. I got mine as a dissertation. You know, in the methodology section, I wrote about how I took my semi-structures interviews. I took them first to pilot them. I was fortunate because when I piloted them, I was piloting it to the practitioner who are teaching the SMEs. So it was like the person who understands them more. And this person said to me, listen, stop writing your English in that high level. You're talking to us. So yeah, bring it down to that. So I detail that. And then I support it with evidence that this was a communication between myself and he brought it back, and you name it. I'm sure any qualitative researcher, if you were to document your stuff and you have supporting document and you have the underpinnings, literature base, you have a leg to fight. Why can't they approve it? Unless it's a political story and maybe according to them. You never know. Because then certain hurdles, you no matter how much you have supporting, information, certain doors can't open no matter how much you knock. But qualitative researchers document it, supporting document, support it with, give the underpinnings of that. Let's see where the committee sits. If they can't approve, then they need to justify under which grounds it can be. Unless maybe the institution says it's outside their scope and maybe restrictions and so forth. We don't know. But I always argue that if committees approve your topic, remember they approve it based on maybe conceptual, paper or a logic model before you even write your dissertation. I mean, someone would have read it there they should have stopped it there before you even, invest so much my amount of work and this and this, Yeah, so, but there are ways and means, to overcome that. I'm talking now from a little bit from my experience, ways and means in which things can be tweaked so that they don't become that sensitive. But yeah, as much as I say, it's that authoritative kind of hurdle and obstacle that one has to overcome. And yeah, it's not an easy journey. You never know. You never know. Some people might have wished to have done your research in that area. Here you come, you're the first one. And how dare you?
How dare you?
It's always the case, But that's the beauty about the research. That's the beauty about the research. I've had my own issues, mental health, it's many things. But the fact that you started your journey, remember why you started. And fight it on. If they say, this is because of this, we can't approve. If it calls for you to change, it is fine. If it calls for you to go to the village again, obtain the permission, tweak it, let it be. Let them tell you rather than fail the subject. I mean, this is somebody's journey. People don't just embark on a PhD just for fun. People have purposes. People have objectives. People already had visualized this thing. I like a comment somebody made. He says, and it's rare you fail a PhD unless something wrong happened. It's rare. I don't know, but that's my opinion. And that's what I heard many people say. It's rare to fail a PhD. In most instances, it's okay to go, tweak it there, change it there. I mean, there's a story here. There's a problem to solve, and so it should be, But yeah, there are obstacles, there are challenges, and some we overcome, and some you feel like you defeated. And but you can't give up on your dream. I always say, no person wakes up and say, today I'm going to do a PhD. That person had already thought. They had a thought process in the whole thing. And yeah, the ones who've achieved, and we're sitting in those committees, I'm not saying let's lax, the requirements, but at times let's help the person what causes it. To be, and if maybe, why don't we say tweak it there and tweak it there? I mean, we need a lot of PhDs in this world. I am told that I think it's 1% in the whole world, and we need a whole lot of them. And problems are, there's enough room for everyone. Shall I say? Can I use those words? There's enough room for everyone.
I love what you've said, and I'll go back to the point that we've touched on in terms of the decolonization of the education system, because we know that certain influences, they are from the Western world. So going back in terms of South Africa and your research as well, which we'll explore further, there was that divide, as you said initially when we started this chat. You said, do you know what, Noma, I might be the first person, but the issues in South Africa. And I suppose the question that I'm asking is, knowing that there was such a regime to say this is the Bantu education where certain groups were marginalized to where we are current day, and knowing that most of the educational systems, they still follow, we'll say the colonizers for the sake of the argument, ways of working, even here in Europe, right? They're trying to decolonize the education system. And, I've had different guests that have come on PhD Hard Talk who've all had their opinions in terms of what that actually means. And they feel like people from the global north, south, they've suffered, right?
Yes.
And they have the ability to think they themselves and develop their own ways of working. However, we've been told this is the way and this is how it should be. I suppose the question that I'm asking is, do you think we need to decolonize the education system so that it's fit for all? Because at the moment it's quite, I wouldn't say narrow, but there's a way of doing things.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I'm going to speak from our context, in our country. Think about it. We have people from diverse walk of life. Some are in rurals, some are in townships. English is my third language, or is it my fourth language? So to expect me to write in that prim and proper English and I'm going to tell you why I'm talking about this. We are looking at AI today and how people use it in academic writing. Now, would you be punitive to somebody, or maybe should I say, before I get to that point, maybe somewhere in our proposals, we need to declare English is my fourth language. So do not even judge me in that manner. I'm going to write English the way academically or scholarly it's supposed to sound. But I don't have that intellect or that A-grade English that is required here. Would you be punitive if I were to say, I'm declaring that, for example, I use AI just to ensure that, it gives volume, it gives weight to my English, it transcribes it, or it transfers it to be scholarly, but it's still within my thoughts. And at that point, then you start working with me. Now, I'm going to tell you, with my PhD, I said to myself, I've spoken to the SMEs in the suburbs. I'm talking now the whites. Then I've spoken to the SMEs in the township. Now I'm thinking, if I were to say to this person, I'm talking strategic management, would they understand what I'm saying? So what I like with my institution, my abstract, they converted it into Zulu, just the abstract, into because I wanted people to have access, decolonization. So I said to my supervisor, I am not talking to only the ones who understand English the way you and I understand it. I intend spreading this thing to as many as possible. So they converted the abstract into Zulu, and they also converted it into Afrikaans. Now, I remember one time I went to UCT because I was delivering something that has to do with community engagement. So I landed in a department where they said to me, we are aware you got your PhD. Do you want us to convert it into Braille? And I was like, what? When we talk decolonization, we're talking a lot of things. Access just through the book. I mean, how many people will read my thesis in English in the township? So we've excluded a lot of people. If we put it in those repositories of the institutions, how do the people in the rurals, how can they access it? The people who are starting as small businesses, how can they, decolonization is a number of things. It's access, it's language, it's acceptance as well. It's understanding, seeing, being, empathy. You see things from the other person, You know, as much as you talked about, you know, your colleague who, you know, had a problem with ethnographic study, if people were to seek to understand, you know, you do have those natives and tribes who say, you can't speak anything about us without us. And you can't take it away. You can't take your documents here without us understanding. So how do you talk to them? Do you leave them with the English version, or do you want to diversify so that, you know, because you never know what quality problem solving, you know, aspects we might get from these people, but we've excluded them because they're not supposed to be part of this. You know, it's a lot of things, you know, decolonization is a funding story, it's a language story, it's access story, you know, it's a number of aspects, and we still have got a long way, you know, but I might say I am aware a number of institutions in South Africa are going the route of decolonizing. You know, we're still learning, we're finding, we want to understand just to get, you know, decolonization literacy, to understand what it means, you know, and yeah, it's not going to be a quick fix. It's not going to be you learning Afrikaans and an Afrikaans person learning Zulu. It's a number of things. There's a culture behind it. You know, or how do you approach? You don't just speak to umama as you like. There's those, you know, those nuances, those small little things. So it's broad, it's language, it's access, it's funding, it's culture, it's so but yeah, people are welcoming. I'm glad to see the change is coming bit by bit. And hopefully we might not be the generation that's still alive, but it will happen, you know, with the way we see things. I like what my institution is doing. I noticed that they are diversing, or as much as I would have wanted to say also accommodate this group, but then they go with the majority. If there's a lot of Xhosa there, then, you know, some of the documents might be communicated in Xhosa, English, and Afrikaans. So there's that, you know, a little bit of opening bit by bit, but we still have got a long way. Yeah, after all, you can't talk about us without us. That's the thing, you know. We express things differently, and that you shouldn't frown at that. You know, it's seek first to understand my culture, why I did it that way. You know, yeah, because remember, we have been programmed to think, things should be done this way, and then when I tell you in my culture we don't do it that way, you know, you should be welcoming as much as I welcomed, you know, stuff. But yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I like the changes that are also happening in our country, and in terms of decolonizing the history subject at high schools and so forth. And beautiful. It needs to be told both ways. You know, it needs to be both ways, and you know, otherwise, you know, it brings harmony. You know, it brings understanding. It brings respect. You know, remember with us, people always say, when you speak to a person, remember to Europeans, when you speak with them, you don't give them, you know, eye contact. You know, there's that trust issue. And in some of us in our culture, it's a matter of respect. When you speak to someone, you don't look them in the eye. You know, that's why I say there's a lot, you know, to unpack, and it's a beautiful journey, you know. I hope everyone is excited by it, and it's a beautiful story. We learn from each other, you know. After all, we are young. We are, what do they call it? We are one unit. Although, you know, you never know, but we're hopeful it's going that route, you know. But primarily access language, you know, culture, you know, and so forth, you know.
So I guess the question I will ask, you've mentioned there that you went to the urban areas and you also went to the suburbs. And I guess the question that I have in terms of performance management, before we get to the two groups, what does performance management mean for the audience at home?
you know, funny what came out of there. Some call it a process, some call it a method, some call it a strategy, some call it a way in which you identify things and you put them into order. That's how they simplify it, you know? Yeah, but performance measurement is nothing else. It's about you putting objectives and goals and measuring, am I achieving that? But the way they put it is there, it's exactly what we say, decolonizing the way we think about other people. And they give you their story. And here you want to write a framework because it's their story. And then they'll take it from, you know, because how do we convince people to adopt?